Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode on Fit as a Fiddle. Our guest today is my little cousin, Trinith Radhakrishnan. He is a graduate of UCLA, graduated in 2021 with a bachelor's in neuroscience. He's currently applying to medical school, and I'm very proud of him because he started an organization that is called Moorpark-to-UCLA, or MC2UCLA, which is a mentorship program that links Moorpark Community College students with UCLA student volunteers. And so we are super excited today to talk about, we have a lot of guests on the show who maybe have been working in the field for like 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but from the perspective of somebody who's applying to medical school and kind of like the current system and the knowledge, we're really lacking that on the show. And I think that this conversation will resonate with people, especially because we're going to talk about imposter syndrome and a lot of different things. I think it goes across age groups and across experience levels. So I think that your unique perspective, Trinith, is going to be really valuable to our show today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Sneha. Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was very nice. Yeah, I'll go ahead and share. I think to really get to what I want to talk about, I'll share my journey from high school all the way back in high school. So in high school, I was certainly not the greatest student. I, didn't care. Honestly, I didn't have any sense of purpose. And so I think that reflected in my academic pursuits, my extracurricular pursuits, just a run-of-the-mill average student. And so when I applied to college, I sort of just applied to a bunch of random schools, didn't really do any research or any meticulous thinking about it that one should be thinking about such a major decision. And so I ended up going to a school called California Lutheran University my freshman year. And it was a wonderful school. I actually still am friends with several people I met there in my first year. But I think I realized after my first year that wasn't a place I wanted to be. That first year, I realized a lot of things. I realized I think, actually when I first really decided that I wanted to pursue medicine. So I'm pretty late to the journey. Most people who tell you they want to go into healthcare, medicine, physical therapy, like you, they tend to know when they're 5 years old for some reason. So
I definitely,
you didn't. Good,
I did not.
But yeah, I definitely did not either until my first year. And so I still enjoyed my time, and I thought it was good to stay close to home. I could help, be around, as you know, my older brother, Arjun, he's severely autistic. So it was a good opportunity for me to also stay close to home and help out as much as I could. But I realized I kind of wanted a different experience, and also more opportunities for research and extracurriculars that I didn't really have at California Lutheran University. And so I figured I wanted to transfer, and the best route I realized at the time was to go to community college for 2 years. And so I went to community college. I did 2 years there very successfully, managed to get a near perfect GPA, 3.9, and transferred into UCLA. And I remember when I first opened that admissions email, my first thought actually wasn't excitement or happiness. That did come very soon, but initially I genuinely thought this was a mistake. I reread the email 5-6 times, and I was like, someone made a mistake over there, because UCLA was always my dream school, even in high school. And the funny thing is, before I got that acceptance from UCLA, I got rejected from UC Davis, I think. So I was like, there's no chance I'm going to get into UCLA if I can't even get into UC Davis. So yeah, I think that initially I just was filled with doubt, and this is a mistake. And unfortunately, that permeated all the way into my first quarter at UCLA. And long story short, my GPA went from a 3.9 to a 1.8 my very first quarter. Complete academic failure. And I did a lot of reflecting after that first quarter, because I remember I was on winter break and my grades came out, and I realized in that moment, if I still want to pursue something like medicine, I can't afford to even slip up anymore. I need to get straight A's to at least bring myself to have a fighting chance. And I did all these GPA calculations, and I realized the highest I can bring myself back up is like 3.75 if I manage to get straight A's, or 3.8, something like that. Fortunately, I managed to do it. I think I got a B plus at some point, but other than that, I brought my GPA back up. But it was a very, stressful, painful period. And I realized, shortly after graduating, it was a phenomenon I was very curious about, because I remember I spoke with several of my class, all of my transfer friends, everyone dropped academically. Maybe not as bad as I did, but it's a pretty universal thing. And I remember I spoke to the former head of the UCLA Transfer Center at the time, Heather Adams, and approached her and I said, hey, like, do you have any data on this? And she told me something shocking. She told me that nearly 30% of transfer students are placed on academic probation after their first quarter at UCLA. But many of them manage to succeed, thrive, and do well, and in their following quarters. And so I realized it's mainly that first quarter that really serves as a pain point academically for a lot of these transfer students, including myself. And there's a variety of reasons for it. It's not because community college students are inherently, academically incapable. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Many of them thrive. It's the fact that you're going from, it's a variety of adjustments, and it's much more than even, a high schooler going into college. The difference there is, I think a lot of high school students, they still have this innate confidence that they got into a great university right out of high school. And so that they're able to carry that. Of course, many freshmen also suffer academically. But I think the difference with transfer students, at least from my perspective and speaking with other community college students, is again, that sense of, look, I ended up in community college. It's not the most glamorous of places to start out as. Of course, many of them are there because they're forced to. They have families. They're very non-traditional applicants, right? So they have no choice. But at the same time, there's this inherent stigma almost. And so when you transfer from that place, as opposed to going from high school, you face your own battles. Going from a semester system to a quarter system, so 16-week length academic term to 10 weeks is quite the adjustment. And also the abundance of opportunities that you are exposed to. Again, you're faced with this idea of almost a FOMO, like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that. And that's exactly what happened to me. I joined UCLA. UCLA is apparently, I think it's like one of the most highest pre-med populations in the country. And so I'm seeing all of my fellow classmates there who were there from freshman year. So they already have their connections. They've been doing research for 3 years. They're on the dance team. They're doing all this stuff. And I'm over here like, okay, I need to get involved. And so I did that. And I tried to do too many things at once, I think. And so for me, it was a combination of not feeling good enough and trying to fit in and trying to do what I'm supposed to do, that really caused me to suffer academically. But fortunately, I was able to reflect on that, focus on what I needed to prioritize, focus on time management, focus on study strategies. And that's sort of the heart of where this program came along. I sort of realized after graduating in my gap year before med school, I wanted to help specifically the community college population that I came from. And so I have, we have a team now, and so we supported many of the students have matriculated into universities like UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, UC San Diego. And so now I'm excited for the next transition help, which was the reason why I founded the program. And now we're going to help them adjust to that pain point of their first term, and hopefully make sure that they don't make the same mistakes that all of us transfers did. So that, I know that was a lot, but that's sort of the long. It's still, there's a lot more to it, but that's the long story short in terms of why I created this program. And so far it's going great. I'm really enjoying it a lot. But yeah, and I think the most rewarding aspect is definitely helping community college students overcome imposter syndrome. It's extremely rewarding. I feel like half my sessions with students, it's technical, I'm helping them with study strategies and essays, but half of it also feels like therapy sessions, which I have no problem with. It's extremely, extremely fulfilling. And I think community college has a lot of untapped potential. A lot of these students, again, extremely different backgrounds. I remember when I was a tutor at community college, there was a class I was tutoring, a mother and daughter were taking that class together, literally sitting next. You never see that. I didn't see that at UCLA at all. But those two students, I mean, I still remember them to this day, but they had the most rigorous work ethic I've ever seen in my life. Both of them worked full time, came to class at like 6, 7 p.m. after work. And they were just trying to get through this algebra class. They weren't even math majors. They were just trying to get through this class to move on with their associate degree requirements. And they are course repeaters as well, but they were undeterred, and I was able to help them, and they managed to pass. But I think community college students carry with them a certain work ethic. And I think that's why they just need a little bit help initially adjusting, and then they tend to really thrive afterwards. And so,
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, that's phenomenal. I'm so thrilled and so excited that you have found this little passion in servicing other people already before you even begin your journey in medical school, let alone your lifelong, service as a doctor in whatever field you choose to practice in. And I think that that's what makes the best doctors and the best people in healthcare is like, you're really coming from a place where you understand the struggle and even if it's not a health struggle, it's still like life struggle, and you're able to talk to people and communicate with them and help them overcome, their challenges and help them navigate through their journeys a little bit more efficiently. So I think it's really, really cool what you're doing right now. So I wanted to kind of dive into a little bit more of the nitty-gritties of what you feel like is the whole basis behind the imposter syndrome and what you see in your, mentees and the people that you work with. Because I can tell you from my perspective, I think to some extent, everyone goes through some level of imposter syndrome when they first start anything new for the first time.
Yep.
So when I went from being a PT student to a PT, I actually didn't have as much imposter syndrome as I did becoming a PT employee to a PT business owner suddenly, which happened all very, very quickly for me. And I remember that I was like, why? It was really easy for me to treat patients, but then it was like, as a business owner of somebody who's like, I'm fully accountable for everything. There's nobody else here to, talk to or oversee things with, or a management structure that's like organizing things. I was like, I'm doing all of this by myself. And I remember, I kind of inundated myself with what you're offering, which is basically like that mentorship and that guidance, but through like podcasts and books and, different just ways of trying to overcome that and build that psychological muscle that you are capable of doing this. And you can build something that's greater than yourself that you'll never know that you can do until you put one foot in front of the other and just go through it. And like, you might have challenges, but you are fully capable of doing this. I remember, even a lot of like those big self-development gurus will say things like, 20% of 80% of business is like psychology of the business, like 20% is just like the business itself, but 80% is the psychology. And I think even within whatever work that you do, especially within healthcare, like I don't want to say that 80% is the psychology of you understanding theoretically what you're doing. Of course, a lot of it is practical and you need to know your stuff. And that's not what I'm saying, but just in terms of once all that academic stuff is taken care of, like you are doing well in school and you're putting in the effort, your ability to feel like you're worthy of the level that you have reached, I think that is a good majority psychology. And your ability to kind of look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I can help somebody and I have the ability to do that well. So I'd love for you to touch on how that feels for medical student or people going into medical school, or the conversations of what you have with people who are maybe currently in medical school going through the same thing.
Yeah, first off, I 100% agree with you. It is a very much so a psychological battle that a lot of healthcare providers face, and I think the pre-med community can most certainly relate to that. If you look at the numbers, it doesn't look too good for a majority of applicants. I mean, 40% of applicants make it into medical school, which is a decent number, but it still means the grand majority of applicants don't get in. And with that being said, that means I believe more than 1/3 of applicants in a given year are re-applicants. And so there's this first off a battle where you fail to get in the first time, and people have to overcome that mental hurdle of being considered a re-applicant and all of the stigma associated with that. But on top of that, and I can specifically speak to the community college pre-med population, I can share a research study with you after the podcast, but there's some research, of course, I don't know how valid it is, and because the medicals don't release data on community college student matriculants, but there was a study that indicated that if you are a community college student, your chances of getting into medical school drop by 30%. Now, don't quote me on that. I don't know how accurate it is, but I'm sure to an extent, there are some more stigmas that community college students face when a medical school admissions committee member reads that they're from community college. So there are a lot of mental battles that students face first getting into medical school, let alone surviving in medical school. Because once you get in, you're again surrounded by a population of people who, you're surrounded by some Olympians go to medical school, people who have accomplished great things, former business owners, whatever the case may be. And I think that to answer your earlier question, that where does imposter syndrome come from? I think it really comes from a lack of information, to be completely honest. I think not having a clear path of what it takes to do what the necessary steps are for you to achieve whatever your goal is, I think that's where imposter syndrome comes from. I think a lot of community college students they don't have the information that a lot of traditional university students have in terms of what it takes to be a successful medical school applicant. I mean, they know the basics. You need a good GPA, you need a good MCAT score, you need clinical experience, you need research, all the variety of extracurriculars. But the small aspects of the application, for instance, applying early versus applying late in the cycle can mean the difference between getting multiple acceptances and none. A lot of community college students aren't aware of that. Because of the fact that med school admissions is on a rolling basis. So someone who applies in late August, September, even though they may be incredibly competitive and they might fit a school well, they might not get in purely because that school doesn't have enough spots left. They've already filled up most of their spots earlier in the year. But unfortunately, it's information that community college students lack. I think, again, given that not all community college students, but many come from disadvantaged backgrounds, they're feeding a family, they're low-income minority groups, and so they just don't have the time or the ability to really dedicate themselves to learning the ins and outs of the medical school admissions process. And so I think once you are equipped with that information and you know what to do, imposter syndrome certainly diminishes. It doesn't go, I don't think it'll ever go away, but it helps. And I think the other side of lack of information is also a lack of self-awareness and knowing what your own capabilities are. And I think that is the ultimate battle. I can tell you how many students I've worked with where, especially autistic community college students, incredibly talented pool. You'd be surprised, some of these students, their work ethic is unlike anything I've seen before. But they're not aware that they actually have that within themselves. And so an approach I've used recently with working with these populations, rather than telling them what to change and what to do and how to approach their studies or how to navigate the transfer application process or whatever it may be, I sort of do a sort of reflection exercise with them and sort of get them to understand what their own capabilities are, what are their own strengths. And some students, they thrive actually not attending lecture and maybe listening to the recorded lecture after they do their own self-study. And once these students identify what their own strengths are, that again, there's a confidence, I can do this. Maybe I don't have to follow the traditional mold. I don't have to go to lecture every day. I don't have to do what every other student is doing. I can thrive in my own way. So I think it's a combination of understanding what you need to do to achieve this information and also having self-awareness of what you're naturally good at. If you can really go all in on your strengths, it's really helpful. That's a way to overcome imposter syndrome. With that being said, personally, I don't think imposter syndrome is something I've conquered myself. I know for a fact, if I get into medical school, it's something I will battle. But I think now I have this awareness that it's normal. Many, many people go through it. I think when I first transferred to UCLA, everyone seemed so confident. I couldn't see weakness in anybody. And so I really felt out of place. But I think having that awareness, first and foremost, that I have a successful track record. I've done it in the past. Therefore, I can refer to that whenever I'm feeling uncertain, knowing my own strengths, knowing what I'm capable of, and also having the information I need to be able to conquer medical school and all of the different requirements I'll have to satisfy when I start medical school. I think combination of those three things, plus an awareness that it's okay to have imposter syndrome. Many, many people have it. In fact, I think the higher you go up in any kind of healthcare professional training, right? As a student, you're facing imposter syndrome relative to your peers. When you're a trainee, you're feeling imposter syndrome relative to the attending position, whoever is supervising you. They seem to know so much more, and you feel like, how can I ever fill their shoes? How can I ever take on that role of responsibility? So I think I'm certainly aware and accepting of the fact that it's always going to be there. And I think that acceptance also helps ironically, it also helps to conquer it.
I
So
love
I think
that.
hopefully that answers your question.
Totally. And I think that one thing that comes to my mind when you just said everything is this level of like there is imposter syndrome and what it's defined by and how people experience it uniquely in themselves. But there's also this idea of challenging yourself almost in a healthy way,
right,
where it's almost like, and I say this, I want to be careful with my words, but it's almost like you're still not enough, but not in a negative way, in a way that makes you feel like, I know what's next and I'm going to work towards getting there. And not, it's like satisfaction and contentness in what I'm doing, but the drive to fill higher shoes and to challenge yourself to continue working at yourself and feeling that, like, I think what it is you look back at yourself, right? I think that's another thing that it helps me all the time, is looking back at yourself and being like, wow, like saying how, like, 5 years ago, did you think that you would be where you are today? Like, no clue, right? And just go back and think of all of those small times, which are really big things that you may have done in your life. And anybody who's listening, even if it doesn't have to do with being in medical school, even if whatever it has to do with, there are examples in your brain where you have overcome where you thought you would be and the challenges that you were faced with, and go to the next step. Because if you're listening and you're here right now, you have done that. I'm sure of it. Like, I promise you, you've accomplished something that you maybe wouldn't have thought that you could have done. And so I think using those examples in your life to fuel yourself right now, to be like, right now I feel this way, but hey, I remember feeling this way once in the past, and look what I did to overcome that and get to a place now. And I know that I feel this kind of uncertainty or this lack thereof of who I am, but hey, I've done this in the past. So that excitement and that challenge to be like looking forward to the next step, and then looking back to that where you are now and being like, wow, we grew even more. Yeah.
I think you also made me realize with that point you made, a way of almost reframing imposter syndrome.
Yes.
With what you just said. I mean, rather than, as you said, rather than looking at it as something of lack, coming from a place of lack, I'm not ready, I'm not capable. Imposter syndrome, in my eyes, is almost necessary if you want to become a professional in whatever you pursue, because without that sense of lack, there's no room for growth. If you ever feel that you've mastered something and you are supremely confident in what you're doing, you're not going to have any opportunity to really—
Say that line one more time, because there's something that bleeped in the back. So I'll cut this out. Say that one more time.
If you're not able to really sit and reflect with yourself and understand that there's room for growth, and if you just feel supremely confident in what you're doing, then that's where mistakes tend to happen, right? And especially in the healthcare industry, where you can't afford to make serious mistakes. So in a way, you want your healthcare provider to have some level of imposter syndrome. It's in effect, in a way, it's almost necessary. So I think what you said is actually, it made me realize it's another really helpful way of looking at imposter syndrome as something that's going to help you grow.
It keeps you on your toes. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's all of the, like, what do you define as imposter syndrome? You can think of something as something negative, or something like you just like we're describing now, as a small little kick in the butt, a small little fuel of discomfort. I think that's another thing that I learn a lot in the world of self-development and professional development, is you kind of always have to be slightly uncomfortable in order to grow. Like, if you are perfectly comfortable all of the time, it's actually really hard to get to the next step. And so you kind of have to push yourself and keep pushing yourself if you are in this trajectory of growth in the first place. So I have a question for you, and it's kind of related to the unique challenges that people who are in your age group, with the environment and the society that we live in right now, like, what kind of different unique challenges do you guys face in relation to entering the medical field or healthcare in general? And do you feel like there's anything different, or do you feel like across the generations you felt like it's kind of sort of been the same?
That's a fantastic question. I definitely do think it's different. I think every single year, regardless of whether you're applying to medical school, physical therapy school, nursing school, it becomes more and more competitive. If you look at the data, I think the average matriculant GPA has shot up by 1 for MD. So from 3.6 to 3.7 over the past of several years. Average MCAT has also shot up. And I actually don't think it's a matter of medical schools becoming more selective. I think it's a matter of the general population becoming more aware and competitive and realizing what it takes to get in. I think information is abundant in today's day and age. And I think That's the difference. I think now people are really treating the MCAT how it should be treated. And there are people like myself who decide to take a gap year to really focus on the MCAT on top of various extracurriculars, as opposed to trying to cram it in with senior year coursework and applications at the same time. So I think people are just becoming much more aware of what it takes to get in. I think people are applying earlier and earlier in the cycle. I think people are really prioritizing research and clinical experience unlike never before. So I think it is different because of the amount of information that is available. And it is more competitive, definitely. Yeah.
Amazing. I think that's good, insightful information. And I think I agree with you. I haven't been in the application process in a very long time, but I can imagine just from hearing conversations that it has become quite competitive.
Yeah.
So I'd love to wrap this conversation up by you sharing your experiences with our favorite person, Arjun,
And
your brother and my cousin as well, who is autistic, and how being his brother has kind of shaped you or changed the way you think about healthcare or patient communication or anything.
Yeah. The way I think about it, the way I am who I am because of Arjun, first and foremost. Being his brother has really shaped me to be someone who I think and I don't say this in any means to brag. I just think it's the reality of it is just, I think I'm very attuned to populations that come with disabilities and people who have disadvantages relative to other people. And I think I gravitate towards those types of populations just because being Arjun's brother and watching the struggles he faced, especially growing up, I was, heartbroken and really wanted to help him to the best of my abilities. But also, I think as a child, witnessing the amazing healthcare he received from his childhood psychiatrist, the multiple therapists who have worked with him extensively, the unwavering patience they've all had, that has shaped me because it made me realize no matter where someone comes from, who they are, what they've gone through, and where they're starting from, they can change and they can improve. You have to have the right level of patience and determination and belief in them. And I think learning that from a young age really pushed me toward a career in medicine, because I can't imagine a career, or in general, any career in healthcare, you can't get anything more fulfilling than that. You are quite literally working with patients. I'm sure, I mean, you can speak to this. You are helping your patients reach their full potential. You are helping them recover in ways that no one else can. Your role is so individual and unique. And without you, their life would be completely different. And so with that comes with it a certain weight of responsibility and importance and a sense of fulfillment that I'm sure, you can't imagine yourself doing anything other than what you do. And at the end of the day, that's what life is about, right? You have to find what really speaks to your soul and what you gravitate towards, and what you found something that you can't imagine yourself, you can't imagine yourself doing anything other than what you're doing in that moment. And so Arjun, 100%, watching his trials and tribulations, watching how medicine has impacted him, how therapy has impacted him, how he has, him, he's the most bubbly, happiest guy in our family.
Absolutely.
Sure he
Favorite
has
person.
exactly. He has his, his tantrums, but he's autistic. That, but other than, he's a gem of a human being. And it's, I think, largely in part because of the support he received from all the healthcare staff that have played a pivotal role in his life. And I hope to be like that. And I hope to be like those people. His therapist, Tina Tomalaski, I to this day, I look up to her immensely. His childhood psychiatrist, everybody. But to answer your question, working, with populations like Arjun in my college career as well, I served as a camp counselor for low-income minority youth and, particularly special needs children, watching them grow in confidence as I worked with them, and watching their own struggles and seeing my brother in them, volunteering in the hospital and seeing patients who have, language barriers that they have to overcome. And I still see my brother in them, because Arjun himself, his vocabulary is very limited, right? So I don't know, I'm just very attuned to those types of populations, and I really want to help them because I know that they have great untapped potential. And so that is why I'm pursuing a career in healthcare. And as of now, I don't fully know what specialty I want to go into, but if I had to pick one, definitely childhood psychiatry is like number one for me, because having worked with, many autistic students at community college, I see their potential, I see where they can go. And so I feel like if I can intervene at an earlier stage when they're just children and provide them the necessary therapy and mindfulness and medication and whatever they need, I can really help alter the rest of their life for the better. And I think that's why I gravitate towards this type of career.
That. And I'm so proud to be your cousin and share. Once you join this profession of healthcare in general, I'm so excited for you, and anyone who's ever your patient is blessed to be your patient because of everything you just said, the empathy that you have and the impact that you're trying to make and the impact that you will make. So Trinith, congratulations on starting Moorpark-to-UCLA, which is an incredible program. I'll drop the website on the show link so people can take a look at it. May not be very specific to you, listener, but I think it's just such an incredible thing for young people to help other young people exceed and succeed in their individual endeavors. And I think that coming from a place of experience and then pushing that forward to future classes and future cohorts, I think that's an incredible thing that you've started. And I can't wait for you to join medical school. It's going to be crazy, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
But you're coming in
I'll
with
have a lot of
yeah.
I'll have a lot of questions for you, I'm sure.
Of course, but you're coming in with so much insight and wisdom on, I think, a lot of everything that we've just talked about today. And I think that that's going to help really catapult you into the right direction. There will be always times, like you said, you'll still have self-doubt and you'll still feel like things are maybe not working out perfectly, but it's kind of embrace the chaos and just take it in one step at a time. And once you get to, it's never ending. Like life, that's just life, right? It's just going to keep, that's going to be the nature of it, is there's always going to be trial tribulations. There's always going to be challenges, but I think the people who can look at it from a place of what do I need to do? What are the steps that I need to take to get to where I need to be? I think that's just the most important thing that anybody can do. So I love that you talked about that a lot on the show today, and I hope listeners gain something. Do you have any last words to leave the audience with?
Yeah, namely, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, just know you're not alone. Maybe people around you aren't talking about it, but it is something that everyone goes through, and look at it as an opportunity for growth. And I'm sure everyone listening to this podcast will be phenomenal and be able to I don't want to say overcome, because you don't have to, but if you're able to accept imposter syndrome, you're on the right path and you're going to do great.
Love it. Thank you, Trinith.
No problem. My pleasure.